I didn't expect a parade. I just wanted my own bed, a clean kitchen, and a room where I didn't have to worry about sand getting into my lungs. That's the thing no one tells you about serving overseas. It's not always the bullets that mess you up. Sometimes it's the breathing. Especially after a blast. I'd been stateside for about 8 months when the VA finally confirmed the lung damage wasn't going to get any better. They called it chronic respiratory trauma related to active duty exposure. Translation: I'd be wheezing for the rest of my life. One lung operated at about 60%, the other liked to remind me of my age and poor decisions. So I retired early, 38 and medically done. I left the Air Force with a few medals, a stack of paperwork, and a quiet apartment in Denver where I could hear myself think. It wasn't peace, but it was quieter than Kandahar, and for me, that was enough. My name's Rebecca Lawton. Everyone back home still calls me Becky, which I hate, but Alabama doesn't care what you prefer. Once you're Becky till death or a legal name change. I hadn't been back to Mobile in nearly 5 years. Phone calls with Dad were regular, but short. Melissa, my little sister, usually intercepted them. Melissa always had a sixth sense for attention. If someone else had it, she wanted it. And if she couldn't have it, she'd find a way to make sure no one else enjoyed it either. She wasn't evil, just a handful. The kind of handful that usually ended up stealing your charger, maxing your emergency credit card, or fake crying at Christmas until she got her way. I was 6 years older. That meant I was the responsible one by default. Babysitter, homework helper, emergency contact when she flunked college chemistry for the 3rd time. Meanwhile, I deployed 3 times, learned to triage a gunshot wound with duct tape, and still had to text Melissa's boyfriend when she ghosted him. Family dynamics, I guess. Dad never saw any of this. To him, Melissa was his baby girl. No matter how many lies she told or bills she forgot to pay, she always had an excuse. She's going through something. She's just emotional. She's young. She's 32, Dad, but I let it go. I was too tired to fight about it, and honestly, my therapist told me it wasn't my job to raise my sister. Or my dad. Boundaries. Rebecca. Use them. So I did, from 2 time zones away. Then came the call. It wasn't from Melissa, or Dad. It was Mrs. Kimball, the neighbor who'd watched us grow up and still baked sour cream pound cake every Sunday like the world hadn't changed since 1965. She said Dad had collapsed on the porch that morning. Ambulance took him to the hospital. Melissa was there. He was in the ICU. That's all she knew. That's all I needed. I didn't pack. I threw 3 outfits and my inhaler into a go bag, grabbed my keys, and hit I-70 East. 12 hours of driving, no sleep, and a whole lot of old country radio because my phone wouldn't connect to Bluetooth. Somewhere near Jackson, my lungs started to tighten up. Air in Alabama always felt heavier, like the humidity carried judgment. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of Mobile General, it was just past sunrise. My shirt stuck to my back. My joints ached from the drive. I was dehydrated, exhausted, and mildly dizzy, but I was there. I walked into the ICU with the confidence of someone who could assemble a field surgical kit under fire and got greeted like a telemarketer. Melissa stood outside Dad's room, arms folded, fake lashes in full flare. "You came," she said, like I was crashing her wedding. "I drove all night." "Too late," she shrugged. "He passed at 3:40 a.m. There's no good way to respond to that. So I just stood there, heart thudding against ribs that didn't want to expand. "He asked for you. Once. But I didn't want to wake you. Figured you'd be tired after, living your big military life." That was her thing. Passive-aggressive Olympic-level jabs. She smiled like she was being gracious, but her voice dripped with insult. I didn't engage. I walked past her and into Dad's room. He looked small. Still. Nothing like the man who used to carry 2x4s on his shoulders while yelling at the neighbor's dog. Machines were unplugged. The white sheet was neatly folded at his chest. Someone had cleaned his hands, but they still looked rough from years of working construction. There was no closure, no final conversation, no bedside moment to say thanks or sorry or goodbye, just silence, and the too late realization that the last time I spoke to him, I let Melissa rush him off the phone. She poked her head into the room, Mom's making arrangements. I'm handling everything. You should probably go rest. I should have argued. But I didn't. My lungs were tight, my head was spinning, and everything felt 2 seconds too slow. I nodded, left the room, and went to the parking lot to get some air. That's when the coughing started. Dry at first, then ragged. My chest clamped down like it remembered we weren't in Denver anymore. I leaned against my car, trying to focus. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Not working. My vision went spotty. I hit the emergency button on my phone and dropped to the curb before the dispatcher even picked up. I woke up 3 hours later in the ER. They'd stabilized me with oxygen and moved me to a private ICU room. When I asked what happened, the nurse said, altitude shift, stress, and exhaustion. You're lucky someone saw you collapse. She smiled. You're tougher than you look. I wasn't in the mood to feel tough. I just wanted my chest to stop aching. Melissa didn't show up until noon. She walked in holding a green smoothie and a Starbucks bag. No flowers. No card. Just attitude. You doing all this for attention? She asked. Like, really? Oxygen tubes? The drama. I stared at her. She was wearing a crop top, to visit someone in intensive care. You're unbelievable, I said. She smirked. No, I'm just not fragile. I didn't reply. The oxygen line hissed beside me. I focused on the sound. Melissa sat down, crossed her legs, and took a bite of her sandwich. She said nothing else for the next 10 minutes. Neither did I. Then she got up and walked to the door. Before leaving, she turned and said, Don't worry, I'll tell everyone you're doing fine. They don't need to come. You're good at being alone anyway. She left. I didn't answer. I just looked out the window. My breathing was shallow, but steady. I reached for the oxygen tube to adjust it, and froze. I didn't move. My hand hovered over the oxygen tube. It wasn't where it should have been. The strap was loose. The cannula wasn't sitting right. I hadn't touched it. A nurse walked in just as I was trying to reattach it properly. She glanced at the monitor, then at me. Your oxygen levels dropped earlier. Did you move the tubing? No, I said, my voice hoarse. She adjusted it, checked the tape on my cheek, and gave me a strange look. It's not like this usually slips on its own. She didn't push it. Neither did I. My chest felt tight again, but for a different reason. The next few hours blurred together blood pressure checks, medication rounds, a new IV line. I kept watching the door. Melissa didn't come back. My mother didn't come at all. By evening, I was allowed to sit up with assistants. A doctor came in to talk to me. Not mine, just someone on rotation. He said they were keeping me overnight for observation. He also asked if I had anyone staying with me. No, I told him. Not really. The nurse brought dinner, a mushy chicken dish that tasted like warm regret. I forced down half of it, drank water, and stared at the ceiling tiles like they might give me answers. None did. Around 9, my phone lit up. A text from Melissa. Funeral is tomorrow at 11. Don't make a scene. That was it. No time, no place. Just a warning disguised as logistics. The hospital released me at 8 the next morning. My oxygen levels had stabilized, but they gave me a portable tank, just in case. I signed the papers, got dressed slowly, and walked out to my rental car with the help of a nurse who clearly didn't get paid enough for this kind of family drama. I hadn't brought anything formal, so I wore the same black blouse I drove down in, pulled my hair back, and hoped no one would notice the hospital band still on my wrist. The church was already full when I arrived. It was one of those traditional Southern chapels, white steeple, dark pews, stained glass windows that made everything look more dramatic than it needed to be. Melissa stood near the front, crying into a tissue with enough force to win an acting award. My mother hovered beside her, patting her back like this was a performance they'd rehearsed. I stayed near the back. No one greeted me. A few old neighbors nodded stiffly. Some didn't recognize me at all. I didn't blame them. I'd changed. And they hadn't. The service was short. The pastor kept it generic safe verses, vague comfort, nothing too personal. I doubted he even knew Dad outside of holidays. Melissa got up to speak. She talked about how close she and Dad were, how much they shared, how she was with him in his final moments, holding his hand, telling him it was okay to let go. I stared at the floor, When she finished, people murmured with approval. A few sniffled. One woman in the front row even dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief like this was a movie. No one asked if I wanted to say anything. No one offered. After the service, I slipped out a side door and made my way to the parking lot. I didn't want to fake small talk. I didn't want to answer questions about where I'd been or how I was doing. They weren't real questions anyway. I had just reached my car when Melissa appeared behind me. "Hey," she said, voice still raw from her performance. "Nice of you to show up." I turned around. He was my father too. She rolled her eyes. "Please. You haven't been part of this family in years. I called every week. He told me things. Things you didn't know." "What?" She laughed. "What, your little military chats?" "He pitied you, Becky. You scared him. You were always so intense. He never knew what to say to you." That hit harder than I expected. I didn't reply. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "You know he left everything to me, right? The house, the land, the savings, all of it. He trusted me." I looked at her. "Are you sure about that?" Her face twitched. Just a flicker. Then it was gone. "I was here," she said. "You weren't. That's all that matters." She walked away, high heels clicking on the asphalt like punctuation marks. I didn't go to the gravesite. I drove back to the motel I was staying in and lay on the bed, still dressed, oxygen tank hissing softly beside me. My head throbbed. My lungs felt bruised. The next morning, I got a call from the law office handling Dad's estate. A woman named Catherine Blake introduced herself and said the will reading was scheduled for the following Thursday. She told me my presence was strongly recommended. I asked if Melissa would be there. Catherine paused before saying, "Yes, it's a full reading." I didn't tell her what happened at the hospital. I didn't mention the funeral. I said thank you, hung up, and stared at the ceiling again. The motel was quiet. I could hear the hum of the AC and the occasional car passing outside. I closed my eyes and thought about Dad's toolbox, the one he never let Melissa touch, the one I used to help him organize by size and function. I wondered where it was now. Probably in her hands. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Melissa. "Don't be late Thursday. Try not to embarrass yourself." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my email and searched for Marcus Jameson. He was still listed as Dr. Marcus Jameson, MD. Internal Medicine. Mobile General Hospital. I typed, "Hi, it's Rebecca Lawton. I think we need to talk." I hit send. I didn't expect an answer right away. Less than 5 minutes later, he replied, "Where can we meet?" I stared at the screen. Something in my chest shifted. Not hope. Not yet. But it wasn't nothing. The coffee shop Marcus picked was 5 blocks from the hospital, tucked between a dry cleaner and a place that sold vape juice and lottery tickets. It was the kind of spot where old ceiling fans wobbled, the chairs were never level, and the coffee tasted like it had something to prove. But it was quiet, and that was the point. He was already there when I walked in, sipping from a chipped mug and scrolling through his phone. He looked up, gave a half smile, then stood. "Rebecca," he said. "Didn't think I'd see you back in Mobile. Is Reddit." I sat across from him. Didn't plan on coming back. He didn't ask about the funeral, which I appreciated. Instead, he waved over the server, ordered another coffee for me, and got straight to the point. "I reviewed your chart," he said. "I wasn't your attending, but I pulled it before they locked it." "Locked it?" I asked. Standard protocol when something odd gets flagged. In your case, oxygen levels plummeting without a machine alarm. The nurse who checked your vitals reported irregular placement of your cannula. "Because it was pulled," I said. He nodded like he'd been waiting for me to confirm it. "And you're sure it wasn't you? You didn't shift in your sleep?" "I was awake," I said. "Melissa was there. Did you see her do it?" I hesitated. I felt it. And I saw her hand just before I blacked out. But no, I didn't see it fully. Marcus leaned back in his seat. The cameras in ICU don't cover inside the rooms, only the hallway. "So we're stuck." "Not necessarily." He pulled out a small folder from his bag and slid it across the table. Inside were a few printed screenshots. One showed Melissa entering your room. Another showed her exiting 12 minutes later. The timestamp lined up with your vitals crash. The nurse, Kimberly Rhodes, filed a report. She said your oxygen tube was not properly attached when she came in. She had to resecure it herself. It's in the chart. Will the hospital do anything? He shook his head. Not without direct proof. No video inside the room, no physical evidence she touched the tubing, but it's enough to raise eyebrows. I stared at the photos. Melissa, in her usual dramatic coat, walking out of the ICU like she owned the place. Her face didn't show guilt, just annoyance, like saving my life had inconvenienced her. Marcus leaned forward. You don't have to do anything with this now, but you should have it. I slid the folder into my bag. Thanks. I'm sorry about your dad, he said after a moment. I nodded. He didn't tell me he was this sick. Maybe he didn't know until the end. In grace. Or maybe he did and didn't want me to worry. Marcus folded his hands. There's something else. Of course there was. Your dad came in for an appointment about a month ago. Routine blood pressure, cholesterol check, nothing big. But during the visit, he asked me something strange. What kind of strange? He asked if it was possible to have someone medically evaluated without them knowing. I blinked. He meant Melissa? He didn't say. But he mentioned my daughter and looked uncomfortable. I asked him why, and he said, she's not who she pretends to be. I'm starting to worry. That's all he said. I sat there, trying to decide if that sounded like my dad or not. It did, in a way. He was old school, never liked confrontation. Believed people eventually snapped out of it. If you just gave them enough time. But maybe, finally, he'd seen what I'd been seeing for years. Did he ever follow up? I asked. Marcus shook his head. Next thing I heard, he was gone. The server brought my coffee. I didn't touch it. I'm going to the will reading, I said. Good. She already told me she's getting everything. He raised an eyebrow. That's what she thinks. I looked up. Do you know something? Marcus hesitated. I was with your dad the last week he was alive. He came in complaining about chest tightness. I told him it was probably anxiety, grief, stress, but before he left, he handed me an envelope. For me? He nodded. He said, give this to Rebecca if anything happens. Only if. I haven't opened it. Do you have it? In my office. We drove to the hospital in separate cars. His office was small, packed with books, dusty files, and a filing cabinet that looked like it came with the building. He unlocked the bottom drawer, pulled out a sealed envelope with my name in my dad's handwriting. I didn't open it there. I waited until I was back in the motel, sitting on the edge of the bed, oxygen tank hissing beside me like a bored roommate. Inside was a single sheet of lined paper, written in pen. Rebecca, if you're reading this, I'm sorry I didn't say things to your face. I should've. I was never good at saying what I felt. You were always strong, and I leaned on that too much. I let Melissa get away with too much because it was easier. That's on me. I've made sure the truth will come out. You deserve better than silence. Love, Dad. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't long, but it was more honest than anything he'd said to me in years. I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and stared at the motel ceiling. Again, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel relieved. I felt heavier, like I'd been carrying this thing for so long that even when someone else finally picked up a piece of it, the weight didn't go away. It just shifted. I didn't know what was in the will. I didn't know what Melissa might have forged, hidden, or destroyed. But I had one thing she didn't. I had that letter. I had Marcus. I had a nurse's report, a folder of time-stamped photos, and a tiny crack in the wall Melissa had spent her life building between me and the rest of the family. I didn't need everything to collapse overnight. I just needed the first brick to fall. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because of the motel mattress, it was lumpy. Sure, but tolerable, but because I kept thinking about the envelope, the hospital room, the way my sister looked at me like I was a loose end she didn't have time to tie up. In the morning, I made coffee in the tiny machine near the sink. It tasted like burnt plastic and old socks, but it was hot and bitter enough to wake me up. I sat with my laptop, staring at the folder Marcus had given me again. The screenshots, the timestamp, the hallway still image of Melissa walking out of my ICU room, like she just borrowed a stapler from someone's desk. No guilt, just business as usual. I didn't need a courtroom or a polygraph to tell me what happened. I already knew. But if I was going to face her at the will reading, I needed to stop playing defense. I needed to understand how deep this went and how long it had been going on. So, I called Marcus. He picked up on the second ring. "I've got a question," I said. "I've got an answer." Was that the first time she did something like that? Or just the first time she got caught? He paused. "You might want to come in." Back at his office, Marcus didn't waste time. He closed the door, sat me down, and opened a locked drawer on his desk. From inside, he pulled out a folder even thicker than the one he'd given me earlier. "This isn't standard," he said, "but it's legal. Your father asked me to document anything concerning." I raised an eyebrow. He knew? He didn't say it directly, but he suspected Melissa was manipulating him. Emotionally, financially, maybe more. He handed me the file. Inside were dated notes, appointment summaries, billing records, most of them tied to Dad's last year. There were logs of missed payments, sudden withdrawals from his bank account that didn't match any medical bills, and 2 calls flagged as suspicious by his financial advisor. "He was losing money?" I asked. Marcus nodded. Slowly, quietly, but it added up. "How much?" Last estimate was just under $80,000. Credit lines, personal loans, some cash advances. The pattern's there. I ran my finger down one of the logs. The handwriting was Dad's. At the bottom of one page, he'd written, "Melissa said she needed help." I didn't ask questions. Of course he didn't. He thought he was helping her, I said. He also thought he could fix it quietly. "Did he tell Mom?" Marcus gave a humorless smile. "Do you really think she didn't know?" "Your mother might not act like it, but she notices everything, she just prefers not to deal with it." That was always the dynamic. Dad enabled, Mom ignored, Melissa exploited. I learned early that keeping the peace meant pretending you weren't bleeding. Marcus stood and crossed the room, pulling a small metal tin off the top shelf. Inside were USB drives labeled by date. "What are those?" "Security footage," he said. "Backup copies from the ICU hallway. Everything from that week." "Why do you have them?" "Because I don't trust the hospital to keep them if this turns into a legal issue." I stared at the drives. That was a level of caution I hadn't expected. Then again, he served too. We both knew what it meant when you saw something wrong and didn't say anything. I looked up at him. "Why are you doing this?" "You asked me that in Germany, remember? When we patched up that Marine who tried to set his own broken arm with a crowbar." "Ask." I half laughed. "He said he didn't want to bother anyone." Marcus nodded. "You said, if we don't protect each other, what's the point?" That shut me up. He handed me one of the USBs. "Keep this somewhere safe, and don't tell anyone you have it." "I won't. Not even Melissa. Especially not Melissa." I left his office with the drive in my pocket, and a pounding headache. Everything was starting to feel less like grief and more like a slow-burning realization that my family might have never actually been on my side. And yet, I wasn't angry. Not the way I used to be. I was tired in a way that settled into my bones. There's a special kind of exhaustion that comes from pretending people love you the way you need them to. Back at the motel, I spread out the documents on the desk. Timeline of withdrawals. Nurse's report. Screenshots. Dad's letter. Security footage log. It wasn't a case file, but it felt like one. And I wasn't looking for justice. I was looking for clarity. When the phone rang, I jumped. It was Catherine Blake, the lawyer handling Dad's estate. "Miss Lawton," she said in a calm, practiced voice. "Just confirming you'll be attending the will reading on Thursday?" "Yes." "Good. Your sister has already confirmed. She requested a private setting, but your father's instructions were very specific. Let me guess. Full reading. All parties present." "Correct. He also asked that a neutral third party be present, and that any relevant evidence be allowed in the room." My heart stopped. "He put that in writing?" She chuckled softly. "Your father may not have said much aloud, but he wasn't stupid. He anticipated conflict." I glanced at the USB drive. "Understood. One last thing," Catherine said. "He named you as an executor, alongside your mother." That caught me off guard. "What?" "He updated the documents 2 weeks before he passed. Said it was a precaution. You'll have joint authority over the estate." Melissa was going to love that. "Thank you," I said. After the call ended, I stared out the window of the motel for a long time. The air was thick, the sky cloudy, and the parking lot mostly empty except for a few dusty trucks and one loud motorcycle that seemed to idle more than it moved. I closed the curtains. Then I sat down, opened my laptop, and started typing out everything I knew, not because I wanted revenge, because I finally had the facts. And facts don't get manipulated like feelings do. The laptop screen was filled with bullet points, facts, dates, statements. I'd built out a rough timeline. When Melissa moved back in, when Dad's account started draining, the hospital visit, the funeral, the ICU incident. Nothing dramatic, just clean, clinical, and very hard to argue with. I wasn't planning a court case. I wasn't trying to sue anyone. I wasn't even sure what I wanted, but writing it out helped. I'd spent my whole life watching Melissa rewrite every story in her favor. I wasn't letting her do that this time. At noon, I got a text from Marcus. "I've got the letter. You should come read it." I grabbed my keys and left without hesitation. Back in his office, he handed me a sealed envelope. My name was on the front. Same handwriting as before Dad's blocky, all caps letters that never quite fit on the line. He used to write grocery lists like this: milk, EGGS, ham, no frills. "Was this with the medical files?" I asked. He nodded. He gave it to me the same day he updated his will, so he'd known. Or at least, suspected. I took the letter, sat down, and opened it. "Rebecca, if you're reading this, I'm dead. Obviously. Not my best opening. But I never knew how to start letters. I want you to know that I saw more than I said. I didn't always speak up when I should have. I told myself I was keeping the peace, but I think I was just cowardly. I let your sister walk all over me, over you. And I regret that. I didn't understand you growing up. You were different. Quiet. Determined. I thought you didn't need me. I was wrong. Melissa made a mess. A big one. I tried to help her. Then I realized she was lying to me. To everyone. I didn't have proof, but I had enough doubt to finally get off the fence. That's why I changed the will. I asked Marcus to look out for you. I don't know if he did. If he didn't, he owes you lunch. I hope this letter finds you with clarity, not anger. I don't want this to become a war. I just want you to know that I saw you. I've always been proud of you. I just never said it right. Love, Dad. It wasn't a long letter. It wasn't emotional, at least not in the way people expect, but it was more than I ever got while he was alive. It felt like something that had been sitting between us for years had finally shifted, just a few inches, but enough to breathe. I handed the letter back to Marcus. "Make a copy for yourself. Keep it with the file." He nodded. "You okay?" No. He didn't press it. I left and drove to the cemetery. I hadn't been back since the service. Melissa had put up some ridiculous photo board at the grave, pictures of Dad and her at the county fair, her holding a trophy from middle school, her on his lap at age 6. Not a single photo of me. I stood there a while, staring at the stone. The dirt was still fresh. Someone had left fake flowers. I didn't bring anything. I didn't say anything. I just stood. When I got back to the motel, there was a message on my room phone. Catherine Blake. Her voice was calm, professional, but it had that sharp edge lawyers get when they're about to tell you something loaded with legal subtext. "Miss Lawton, I wanted to inform you that your sister has requested access to the property prior to the will reading. Per your father's instructions, that request has been denied until the estate is settled. I just thought you should be aware." Translation. Melissa tried to break into the finish line early. I called Catherine back. "Has she seen the new will?" "No one has. Your father left it sealed, to be read in person. So she still thinks she's getting everything." There was a pause on the other end. "It's possible." "Good." The next day, I drove by the house, not to go in, just to see it. The place looked mostly the same: white shutters, faded porch. That busted gutter Dad never fixed. Melissa's car wasn't there, but someone had left a cigarette in the front yard. She didn't smoke. Her boyfriend probably did. He was one of those on and off types with no job and a podcast about crypto. I didn't get out of the car. I just sat there, watching the house like it might blink. The neighborhood kids were playing basketball 2 driveways down. A dog barked from across the street. It was too normal. The house I grew up in didn't feel like home. It felt like a museum built on a lie. When I pulled away, I saw Melissa's car coming down the street. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and pretended not to, but her music was blasting, and she was laughing into her phone like nothing had ever happened. like she hadn't ripped an oxygen tube from my face, like she hadn't made a dying man's last months about herself. Back at the motel, I reviewed everything one more time. Dad's letter, Marcus's report, the financial documents, the nurse's statement. I printed everything, made 3 sets, one for me, one for Catherine, one locked in my car, just in case. That night, I didn't dream. I woke up before sunrise, made real coffee at a gas station up the road, and sat in my car outside the law office 20 minutes before it opened. Not because I was eager, because I wasn't walking in there unprepared. The law office didn't look like much from the outside, just another brick building with blinds always half closed and a name in gold lettering that hadn't been touched up in years. But inside, it was spotless, air-conditioned, quiet, and filled with that faint smell of old leather chairs and documents that had outlived most of the people who signed them. Catherine Blake stood at the front, sorting through a file so thick it looked like it had been building its own case for years. She glanced up when I walked in, nodded, and motioned toward the long conference table. "You're early," she said. "I like knowing the exits," I replied. She didn't comment. She just handed me a printed agenda and pointed to a chair near the end of the table. "Your mother and sister will be arriving shortly. Your doctor friend already called to confirm he's coming." "He's not just a friend." "Understood." I took my seat and kept my face neutral. The table was covered in manila folders, color-coded tabs, and 3 sealed envelopes marked with my father's initials. Whatever he'd put in those, he hadn't meant to be vague about it. 10 minutes later, the door opened. Melissa came in first, sunglasses still on despite being indoors, a designer handbag clutched like a weapon, and that overdone perfume she thought made her look classy. My mother followed, more subdued, eyes red-rimmed but dry. Melissa scanned the room, saw me, and immediately rolled her eyes. "Wow, you beat me here. That's rare." I didn't respond. Catherine didn't either. She just gestured toward their seats across the table. "Thank you both for being on time," she said. "As executor of William Lawton's estate, and by his written request, I will now begin the formal reading of his will. No interruptions will be tolerated." Melissa leaned back like she was settling in to enjoy a movie where she starred as the sole heir. Catherine opened the first envelope and began reading. "I, William E. Lawton, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The first few paragraphs were legal fluff, revoking previous wills, verifying dates, formal language about debts and taxes. Melissa started tapping her fingernail against the table. My mother stared straight ahead, then Catherine turned the page. "The primary residence located at 214 Mayfield Lane, including the surrounding property, is to be transferred in full to my daughter, Rebecca Lawton." I release. Melissa blinked. "What?" she said. Catherine didn't look up. "Please wait until the reading is finished." "No, that can't be right. He told me he promised." Catherine continued without pausing. "All monetary assets in the form of checking, savings, and retirement accounts are to be used to establish a dedicated fund for the Lawton Women Vets Foundation. Initial endowment, $100,000. I felt something in my chest shift. Not satisfaction. Not yet. Just weight redistribution. Melissa was staring, jaw slightly open. My mother shifted in her seat. "The contents of my personal safe, including my medals, service revolver, and family records, are to be donated to the Tuscaloosa Military History Museum in honor of my daughter's service." Silence. No one moved. Then Melissa snapped. "This is insane." He must have been confused. He was old. He wasn't thinking clearly. Catherine cut her off with a glance. "Per William's request, if any party attempts to contest the will, they forfeit any rights to items not already assigned. Additionally, he requested the presence of 2 individuals for the final portion." She stood and walked to the door, opening it. Marcus walked in first, calm, professional, holding a folder under one arm. Behind him came Nurse Kimberly. She looked surprised to be here, but her eyes were steady. Melissa's face went pale. "What is this?" she asked, voice shrill now. "Why are they here?" Catherine took her seat again. "Dr. Jameson, please proceed." Marcus nodded. 3 days before Mr. Lawton passed, I visited his daughter Rebecca at Mobile General ICU. She had been admitted for respiratory distress. When I entered her room, I found her struggling to breathe, and her oxygen tube had been removed. Melissa muttered something under her breath. I reattached it immediately. She recovered. But what matters here is that the nurse on call witnessed Rebecca's sister leaving the room moments earlier. Kimberly stepped forward. I didn't think much of it at first, but after seeing how Rebecca was when I entered, I knew it wasn't an accident. Melissa stood. You're lying. Catherine raised a hand. Sit down, or you'll be asked to leave. Melissa sat, but her eyes were wild now. Marcus opened his folder. These are timestamp security stills showing Melissa entering and exiting the room within the window of the oxygen failure. He slid copies across the table. Catherine took one. I didn't touch mine. She was alone with Rebecca. No staff entered or exited in between. And we have a written report from Nurse Rhodes confirming the state of the equipment. I have a no. Catherine took a deep breath and opened the final envelope. This letter is from William Lawton. It was to be read only if serious concerns about Melissa's actions were raised. She unfolded the page and read, To whoever hears this, I know I should have said more in life. I stayed silent too long. Melissa has lied to me, stolen from me, and now I fear she may do worse. I changed this will to protect Rebecca, who has spent her life cleaning up after the rest of us. If my silence helped create this mess, let this document be my final correction. Melissa was shaking now. Her hands were clenched. Her mother reached for her, but Melissa pulled away. This is character assassination, she spat. You're just bitter because I was the one who stayed. I was the one who took care of him. Marcus looked at her calmly. And I saw what you did, so did the nurse. Your father suspected it. He prepared for it. Catherine closed the file. Unless there are further questions, this concludes the reading of the will. No one said anything. No one had to. The room didn't feel like a legal office anymore. It felt like a battlefield, except no one was yelling, no one was running, and no one bled. They just sat there, stunned. While Melissa looked like someone had yanked the rug out from under her and she was still mid-air. She didn't say a word. She just blinked. Her breathing changed shorter, faster, but her face was frozen in that too proud to crack expression she always wore when the truth cornered her. Marcus didn't take his eyes off her. I saw what you did, he said again, but then he leaned forward, rested his hands on the table, and added the 6 words that made the oxygen leave the room. You almost let your sister die. No theatrics. No raised voice. Just a sentence that carried the weight of everything she tried to bury. Melissa flinched, like the words slapped her. My mother let out a noise, a half gasp, half sob, but no one looked at her. Marcus didn't move. I was there. I walked in 10 seconds after you stepped out. Her oxygen was disconnected, her vitals crashing, and you were walking away like you'd just finished fluffing her pillow. Melissa opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Kimberly picked up where he left off. I saw the readings. I saw the monitor screaming for help while Rebecca was trying to breathe on her own. If I had walked in even a minute later, she wouldn't be sitting here right now. Catherine let the silence hang. No one filled it. No one had the guts. Melissa finally spoke, voice brittle. You don't know what I was thinking. Marcus raised an eyebrow. No, but I know what you did. Catherine folded the will, placed it in a folder, and locked it in a drawer behind her. This is no longer about inheritance, she said. This is about integrity. And truth. Your father knew things he never said aloud, but he gave us this framework so that those truths didn't disappear with him. Melissa looked at me for the first time all day. Not the glance-over kind. A real look. And in that moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Not guilt, not regret. Fear. Real fear. Because she'd never expected me to survive. Not the hospital visit. Not the will. Not the reveal. She thought I'd crumble like I always did, too polite to push back, too disciplined to make a scene. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Catherine began gathering her materials. This meeting is concluded. Property transfer will begin next week. Legal filings will be submitted by Monday. Melissa, as you were not named in the will, you will receive no portion of the estate. If you attempt to contest the will, this file, she patted the stack of evidence, becomes public record. My mother started to stand, then sat back down like her knees gave out halfway through the decision. Melissa remained seated, but her entire body was locked tight, like one wrong word would snap her in half. Marcus stood. Kimberly followed. Neither of them looked at Melissa again. As they moved to the door, Catherine turned to me. Rebecca, if you'd like to speak with me privately, you're welcome to stay. I'm good. She nodded once, businesslike. Then we're done here. I walked out without a glance behind me. In the parking lot, the sun felt too bright. My body was tired, but not from the kind of exhaustion sleep could fix. It was a different kind of drain, the one that came after you'd held your breath for too long and finally exhaled, only to realize how long you'd been doing it. Marcus was standing by his car. He looked over as I approached. You okay? Define okay. He smirked. Alive. Breathing. In possession of land, assets, and the moral high ground. Then I guess I'm great. It's actually... Kimberly reached into her purse and pulled out a folded note. In case you ever need a statement for anything formal. I took it. Thank you, for everything. She looked at me for a long moment. No one should ever have to fight this hard just to be believed. She got in her car and drove off. Marcus lingered a moment longer. You have people now, he said. Even if you didn't before. I nodded. I didn't trust my voice to reply. He opened his door, paused. You gonna keep the house? I haven't decided. He looked at me like he wanted to say something else, but chose not to, just gave a small wave and pulled out of the lot. Inside my car, I sat with the engine off and stared at the steering wheel. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. That, in itself, felt foreign. The fight wasn't over. Not technically. Melissa would try something, or maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she'd finally realize the limits of manipulation when it came with consequences. But even if she didn't push back, I wasn't going back to how things were. This wasn't about who won or lost. It was about finally being seen. And no one was going to take that away from me again. I didn't go back to the motel right away. I drove around town for nearly an hour, passing by places that hadn't changed in 20 years. The old gas station where they still used paper logs for pump maintenance, the faded hardware store that somehow outlived a Home Depot, and the broken traffic light on Madison Avenue that blinked red in every direction like it gave up trying to decide. When I finally did pull into the parking lot, Melissa was there leaning against the hood of her car, arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her head like some kind of suburban warlord. I parked 2 spaces away, got out slowly, and didn't say a word. She got to me first. You think you won something in there? Her voice was sharp, like she'd rehearsed this opening line the whole way over. I kept my tone flat. I didn't win. I survived. You think this makes you better than me? I never needed to be better than you. I just wanted to stop being punished for not being you. She laughed. It wasn't real. It was one of those empty laughs you make when you're out of arguments but still addicted to the performance. He was manipulated, she said. You and your little army buddy turned him against me when he was too old to think straight. Melissa, I said. He gave you 30 years of chances. You used every one of them to lie, guilt, and take whatever wasn't nailed down. Action. You weren't even here. No. I was getting shot at so you could stay home and max out his credit card on Etsy crystal bundles. That shut her up for a second. Not long, but enough for a pause. You don't know what I was dealing with, she snapped. You almost killed me. It was a mistake. Say that sentence again, I said, stepping a little closer. But look me in the eye this time. She didn't. She looked at the pavement, then back at her car, like she had somewhere better to be but couldn't justify leaving without finishing the script. I'm still family, she muttered. No, your blood. That's not the same thing. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. For the first time in forever, she didn't have a comeback. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to walk away. You're going to stop calling, stop texting, stop pretending like any of this was yours to begin with. And in return, I won't press charges. Her head snapped up. You can't prove. I don't need to. But I've got a doctor, a nurse, a written report, and a hospital that doesn't like lawsuits. You want this to go public? Be my guest. We'll let the internet decide. I could see it click in her eyes, the realization that this was bigger than just losing Dad's house. She'd lost the narrative, the sympathy, the image she'd spent years curating with fake tears and selective memory. You don't get to cut me out, she said finally, quieter now. We're sisters. We were. I said. Now we're just 2 people who happen to grow up in the same zip code. She turned without another word, got in her car, and peeled out of the lot like that made her the one in control. I didn't watch her leave. I walked into the motel room, sat on the edge of the bed, and took the oxygen tank off the nightstand. I didn't need it anymore, but I kept it close, a reminder that breathing wasn't guaranteed. Not when people like her were in the room. I took out my phone and texted Marcus. "It's done. I have to bented." He wrote back a minute later. "Good. Let me know if she comes near you again." I didn't answer. There wasn't anything else to say. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office to file the property transfer paperwork. The woman behind the counter was efficient, no nonsense, and had a smile that felt like it came with terms and conditions. "You're the daughter, right?" she asked, glancing at the name on the form. "One of them." "Well," she said, stamping the papers, "looks like you're the only one that mattered." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just nodded and took the receipt. Outside, the sun hit different, not brighter, just clearer. I stopped by the house again. This time, I got out. The key fit. The lock turned. The door opened with a creak that sounded too dramatic to be real. But it wasn't staged, it just hadn't been oiled since the Bush administration. Inside, everything was just as I remembered, which somehow made it worse. The same couch. Same coffee table with a scratch shaped like a question mark. Same fake ficus that Dad always claimed was real. I walked through the rooms slowly, not like a daughter coming home, but like someone appraising the damage after a storm. His study was untouched. The old desk, the medals in their cases, a notepad on the shelf with a pen stuck between pages that hadn't been flipped in months. I sat in his chair. It creaked under my weight, same as it always had. On the corner of the desk was a small wooden box. I opened it. Inside was a folded receipt from a hardware store and a business card for a contractor. On the back of the card, in his handwriting, were 4 words. "Fix the back steps. R." That was him. Direct. No fuss. I looked out the window toward the porch. The back steps were still cracked, a little warped from water damage. I didn't cry. I didn't sigh. I just stood, walked outside, and looked at the steps myself. They weren't that bad. Just neglected. Neglect can rot anything if you let it sit long enough. The next week was mostly quiet. No texts from Melissa. No calls from my mother. I assumed they'd both retreated into the same insulated bubble they always had, where accountability didn't exist, and uncomfortable truths got rebranded as misunderstandings. I didn't chase them. I didn't try to fix anything. There was nothing left to fix. I spent my mornings on the porch, drinking black coffee that tasted like charcoal and memories, and watching the neighborhood move on like nothing had happened. Mr. Granger still walked his dog at 6:30 sharp. The teenagers across the street still played music too loud. Someone still left flyers for lost cats on the mailbox. Grief didn't stop the world. It just made you notice how easily the world ignored it. The contractor Dad had written on the back of that business card finally called me back. I had him replace the back steps and reinforce the railing, not because I planned to stay, but because it felt like something that needed to be done, like closing a loop Dad had started. When I mentioned his name, the contractor paused, said he remembered Dad as the quiet one who tipped well and never complained. That sounded about right. Marcus stopped by once with takeout and a 6-pack. "Look at you," he said, standing in the kitchen. "Domestic. Don't get used to it. I'm only pretending to know what I'm doing." He popped the cap off a bottle and leaned against the counter. "Melissa been in contact?" Unquote. "No. And if she tries, I'm not picking up." He nodded. "You serious about cutting her off?" "I'm serious about not bleeding for people who sharpen the knives." He didn't say anything for a moment, just nodded slowly and sipped his beer. "She'll come around," he said eventually. "Then she can stay where she is." We ate in silence for a while. Comfortable silence. The kind you only get with someone who's seen you both at your best and with a hospital bracelet on. After dinner, he pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. "What's this?" "Something your dad left with me. He asked me not to give it to you until things settled." I opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note and a small key. The note was short. "Becky, this key is for the lockbox in the garage. I kept it separate because your sister never bothered to learn where it was. Figured if anyone would understand why that mattered, it'd be you." "Dad." I set the note down and looked at Marcus. Should I be worried? I didn't ask what was in it. We finished the beer, then headed out to the garage. The lockbox was old, metal, and shoved behind a stack of old lawn chairs and a half-deflated beach ball that probably dated back to the Clinton years. The key turned without a fight. Inside were several folders, an envelope full of cash, and a flash drive. Marcus gave me space as I pulled everything out. The folders held photocopies of bank statements, some of which showed withdrawals matching the dates in his financial logs from the hospital. Dad had been tracking every dollar, and he'd written notes in the margins. Dates. Questions. Even a list labeled calls to verify with phone numbers and check marks. He'd done more than suspect. He'd investigated. The envelope of cash had about $6,000 in it. Taped to it was a note. Emergency. Yours. Not hers. The flash drive was labeled in pen, Melissa, just in case. I didn't plug it in that night. I didn't want to see whatever was on it yet. I wanted to know that I could, and that was enough. The next day, I got a call from Catherine Blake. Just an update, she said. Your sister has signed a formal waiver relinquishing any claim to the estate. Her attorney has advised her not to pursue further contact. Did she sign it willingly? She signed it while swearing loudly, but yes. Then we're done here. I hung up and stood in the middle of the kitchen for a while. No movement, no noise, just the steady tick of the second hand on the old wall clock above the stove, the one Dad never replaced because it still works, don't it? I opened the window and let the warm air in. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch with the letter Dad wrote and read it again. Not because I needed reassurance, but because I wanted to hear his voice in my head. The cadence, the clipped way he said my name when he was trying not to get emotional. I don't want this to become a war. He got his wish. It wasn't a war. Wars have rules. This was something else. And now it was done. I went back inside and took the hospital folder off the table. I put it in a fireproof box, along with the USB drives, the letter, the property deed, and everything else that mattered. Then I deleted Melissa's number from my phone. Not blocked. Not archived. Deleted. I wasn't leaving a door open for reconciliation or a possible holiday truce. This wasn't the kind of fracture you glued back together over coffee and forgiveness. This was structural, lifelong, and entirely preventable if she'd just stopped before she went too far. But she didn't. So I did. The first night I spent alone in the house didn't feel triumphant. It felt unfamiliar. Not scary, not sad, just different, like staying in a stranger's home where all the furniture had memories attached but none of them were really yours. I walked through the rooms after dark with no lights on. The moon was full, and it spilled just enough light across the floorboards to let me see where everything was. I didn't trip over anything. That felt like a small win. The kitchen still had the same ugly linoleum tiles from the 90 seconds. The fridge made a noise like it was sighing every 30 minutes. The living room smelled faintly of lemon pledge and old wood, and the master bedroom, the one Dad had used, still had a stack of Reader's Digest magazines on the nightstand, like the world hadn't changed in decades. I didn't move into his room. I didn't want it. I picked the guest room down the hall. Smaller, but clean. Neutral. Unattached to anything painful. I slept with the window cracked. I hadn't done that in years. The next morning, I called the county office and asked about registering a nonprofit. Catherine had already sent me the details about the fund Dad had left. The money was real. The name Lawton Women Vets Foundation wasn't just symbolic. It was something he put in writing because he wanted to leave something that mattered. So I followed through. I didn't turn it into a giant center with brick walls and a ribbon-cutting ceremony. I didn't need a board of directors or photo ops. I started simple, a converted tool shed out back with a window unit, 3 folding chairs, a coffee pot, and a sign on the door that said, "For women who served and need to breathe again." Some people thought it was literal. Some got the metaphor. Either way, the first person who showed up was a woman named Jill. She was 34, Navy vet, had 2 kids and a divorce still chewing on her paycheck. She didn't say much the first time, just sat there and drank gas station coffee with too much powdered creamer. The second time, she brought muffins. The third time, she cried. After that, it wasn't just Jill. A few more women trickled in. Some I'd met during deployments. Some heard through a friend. Some just showed up because someone else told them. There's a place you can go where no one asks you to be okay. I didn't pretend to be a therapist. I wasn't. But I listened. And I offered what I had. Quiet, honesty, coffee, and the assurance that breathing doesn't have to hurt forever. At night, I'd walk the property with a flashlight and check the shed like it was some sacred space. I fixed the locks, repainted the trim, replaced the roof myself after a thunderstorm peeled back part of the metal. I learned how to build again. Not just things. Myself. Marcus visited sometimes. Not often. He gave me space. He brought me jokes in the form of dry sarcasm and prescription-grade common sense. He never asked me to talk about Melissa. He knew better. One day, he brought by a woman from the VA who helped veterans transition into civilian leadership roles. She took one look at the place and said, "It's raw, but it's real. You should keep going." So I did. I started hosting Sunday nights. Nothing formal, just a few chairs, some grilled cheese sandwiches, and the understanding that no one would talk about medals, ranks, or what they saw in uniform unless they wanted to. We talked about bills, relationships, panic attacks in Walmart parking lots, nightmares, therapy that worked, therapy that didn't, the guilt of surviving, the guilt of coming home and not feeling anything. It wasn't healing. Not right away, but it was air. And most of us had gone too long without enough of it. I never told them about Melissa. Not because I was hiding it, but because my story wasn't special. Too many of them had a version of it, a sibling who cut deep, a parent who played favorites, a family that only remembered them when they needed a photo in uniform for Facebook likes on Veterans Day. Some things don't need to be explained. They just need to be heard in the silence between conversations. One afternoon, while reorganizing a supply shelf in the shed, I found an old notebook wedged behind the cabinet. I recognized the handwriting. It was Dad's. It wasn't a diary, just notes. Ideas for home repairs. A grocery list that included beets gross for Becky. A half-written budget for something called porch expansion, followed by, "Don't tell Melissa." Near the back was a line he'd written in all caps. "Some people break things. Some people repair them. Don't let the breakers convince you they're the same." I tore that page out and pinned it to the corkboard in the shed, right next to the sign-in sheet and the emergency contact numbers. People noticed it. No one asked. The day I took down the old framed photo of Melissa from the hallway, I didn't replace it. I didn't need to fill every blank space with something better. Some things just needed to stay empty. One morning, about 4 months after the will, reading, I got a letter in the mail with no return address. Inside was a short note, written in handwriting that was too neat to be Melissa's, but too familiar to be a stranger's. I still don't think I did anything wrong. But I know I lost. And I know why. You were always the one Dad believed in. I just didn't want to believe that. There was no signature, just silence on paper. I didn't respond. I didn't shred it either. I folded it once, tucked it between the pages of Dad's notebook, and closed it, not because I forgave her, but because I had already chosen to stop carrying her. The foundation kept growing, slowly. No social media, no flyers, just women who told other women, "You'll like it there. It's honest." And maybe that's all I ever wanted. Not revenge. Not to be right. Just somewhere I didn't have to apologize for being the one who stayed standing. Even when everyone else walked away,